Pleasure to be here. It's my fifth time to India. I actually got married here. How's that? 20 years ago. So I'm an honorary Indian, not because I got married in India, which you're probably thinking. I'm an honorary Indian in part. That's part of it. The other reason why is because I'm one of the rare Americans who can understand and appreciate cricket. Okay. So I know there's a big match on Sunday, so thanks for coming and setting that aside for a little while. I always say the three most popular sports in India, you know what they are? Cricket, cricket, and cricket is what I tell everybody. So anyway, so it's a great pleasure to be here. We do have a lot of fond feelings about India, so it's a chance to spend some time. A lot of what I'm going to talk about, though, really goes beyond any one country, so it's not really about India. It's as much as what I've learned working with companies all over the place, U.S. and otherwise. So I'm going to talk about building brands, in today's competitive marketplace, and there's no doubt that's true. So I'm going to try to give you a little flavor for the thinking. I'm just finishing the 4th edition of my strategic brand management textbook. It's going to get published in July, and then we'll start rolling it out across the world in different adaptations. And it really is my pleasure working with Ami and Isaac on this. They've done a wonderful job. I think this is probably one of the best adaptations that we've seen, certainly at Pearson, of the textbooks. I'm really thrilled that it happened in India because that means a lot to me. So I have to thank them for all the work that they did. They did a fantastic job. Really, really excellent. But the fact is, it's an important topic. It's taught in business schools around the world. The Keller book, which is, again, been adapted in India and many other countries. Full chapter on branding, courses taught to MBA students on branding. So it's a very important topic. Now, I've been lucky. I got involved in this 25 years ago, so a long time ago. And in that period of time since then, worked with many, many different companies. And these are all the companies I've worked with for multiple engagements, different projects through the years. Some of these have been very long-term relationships. So I've learned a lot from these companies. It's given me a chance to see branding from many, many different points of view. So I really value that. And that's part of the input I'm going to try to share with you today. So a little bit on just brands, the power of brands. And so I think that why is this an important topic? Well, what is a brand? It's a promise. It's a way to set consumers' expectations. It reduces risk. In a world with more and more uncertainty, more complications, the ability of a brand to simplify is powerful. So that, I think, is really true. I think at the heart of a great brand are great products and services. So we can talk about all kinds of things, but fundamentally you have to have a good product and a good service. That said, every brand contact matters. So every time anyone comes in contact in any way with your brand, that affects the way they think about it, the way they feel about it, and the success of that brand. So a few setup slides. I just want to go through a few setup slides. So the power of brand resides in the minds of customers. And that's a really important realization. So it's what they think, it's what they feel. That's the power of a brand. So you do all these different things as a marketer. You design products, you design services, you distribute, sell, price, all the things you do to try to create a great customer experience. But ultimately, it's what's up here and it's what's up here, and I guess what's in the pocket in terms of the wallet and what people are willing to spend that matters. A strong brand actually is very advantageous for what it does in terms of your marketing effectiveness and efficiency. So that is really, really important. We could spend time talking about that, but that's what makes a brand valuable is in part the premiums it commands, the way its communications are more effective, how the channel strategy works better. So for lots and lots of reasons, a strong brand improves marketing effectiveness and efficiency, and because of that, a strong brand is one of a firm's most valuable intangible assets. And that realization has affected a lot of companies very profoundly because they realize that for all the factories, for all the equipment, for all the land, for all the physical assets they own, the fact is their most valuable asset in many cases is actually intangible And it's literally the brand and its reputation and the success it's had in the marketplace. So that changes the way they think about how they run their marketing, how they treat their brands as a result. Then the last sort of setup is how important it is internally to have a strong brand. So we can talk about customers, but internally matters just as much, and certainly in service organizations. So the ability of a brand to inspire, to really motivate consumers is so powerful. Employees is so powerful. So it's the internal side, too, that's just as important. And I really see that working with companies, because I work with companies all the time at different stages of their history. And working with a Kodak, 3 years ago when they were in a lot of trouble was very different from working maybe with a Google 3 years ago who was just exploding in the marketplace. But here are the challenges. I'm not going to go through these in detail because we all know these. In fact, I'm going to go through these real fast. So let's just go one after another. Basically, here's what makes marketing, branding, business tough. Rapid technological developments of all kinds, all over the place. As part of that, greater customer empowerment. They know a lot more. They have a much louder voice than they ever had before. Traditional media is so much more fragmented in any country. So just here, in the few hours I've been here and, watching the TV and looking at some of the advertising and the channels and just seeing on the cable how many different channels there are now, which you find anywhere in the world. And obviously the growth of interactive and mobile, okay, which we'll talk a little bit about today. The channels have transformed and been so much disintermediation. So the route between you and the customer is not as direct as it once was. There are lots of other people and other players that can get involved. Increased competition, a lot of that's global, maybe private label. And you see a lot of industry convergence. So it's the fact, look at Apple. Apple one time was in computers. Well, now it's in communications. And doing it and stretching into these other industries, and it's all converging in different ways. Globalization, growth of developing markets. Before I got here, I spent some time in China. So last week I was in Shanghai and some other places, and it's just fascinating seeing the development around the world of these markets. It's just so fast and changing so quickly, and it's interesting for me to think back 20 years ago when I came here and first came here for the first time to get married. And to see how much it's changed in those 20 years, it's just amazing, almost unbelievable, really. And then, of course, there's heightened environmental, community, and social concerns. So there's a lot more worried about, are we doing the right things with our marketing, with our products, for the environment, and for communities, and for social issues. Oh, and we had a recession, too. Okay, so that's a lot to deal with. That's a whole lot of change. So I think that's the challenge. And so what I'm going to do is talk about how to deal with that. And just one example. And you may not know all these brands. So some of these you will, but I'm not sure you know all these. But MySpace, which was certainly one of the first social communities, right? It was. I think back 5 years ago. Think back 5-10 years ago. MySpace, really popular, right? Yahoo, doing great at that time. Blockbuster, which was a video rental. Okay, that's where everybody went for their Friday nights or Saturday nights. This afternoon they'd go get their video to rent, or later DVD to watch a movie. Barnes & Noble was one of the biggest bookseller chains in the U.S. Barnes & Noble, all the major cities, lots of locations, selling all these books, and they had coffee shops within there, all kinds of things. Okay, that's 5 or 10 years ago. Let's fast forward to today. These brands have all overtaken those and almost put those others out of business, basically. In some cases they are. Blockbuster, for example, and Barnes & Noble. Facebook, Google, Netflix, and Amazon. Okay. Again, U.S. brands. I'm using that market as an example, but I'm sure you're familiar and you know some of these for sure. Certainly Facebook, Google. Netflix is basically done by mail, so I don't have to go to a Blockbuster. I can just do all this by mail with the DVD. It shows up the next day. And Amazon too. So they've done a great job, but even now, people wonder about these. Is Google going to stay successful? You know, can Netflix keep going forward? So obviously, you know, just because you're successful at one time or successful today doesn't guarantee the future. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is how do you try to ensure that? How do you try to stay on top, if you will? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about 6 imperatives. They're listed here. I'm not going to talk about them now, so I'm going to go through them one by one and talk about them, the concepts, some examples, and that's sort of the focus. Is saying these are, to me, the imperatives. These are the 6 things I think a lot about, and I think are very, very useful and important going forward. So let me start. Let me go through each of them. Let me start with the first one. And the first one is to fully and accurately factor the consumer into the branding equation. And in some ways, you can say we've always had to do that in marketing. Well, I think now more than ever, it's critical to bring that consumer in and to really understand what consumers know and don't know and what they want and don't want. So there was a concept in marketing 10 or so years ago called permission marketing. Does anyone remember permission marketing? Remember that? And the idea was, in part with the internet, that the consumer was more empowered and that you needed to seek permission from the consumer as to what kind of information they wanted and when. And the idea was that the consumer was somehow so enlightened that they knew how to say yes or no. My feeling is a lot of consumers don't even know what questions they should be asking about a product or about a brand. So I talk about participation marketing, which is saying, I'm going to ask your permission, but you know, I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to tell you the kinds of questions you should be asking, the kinds of things you should be thinking about, and giving you choices so that you have a better sense about when to give me permission or not. And that's what I'm saying. What do they know? What do they not know? What do they like? What do they not like? And really getting close to them. And then the other thing I think is important is recognizing customer or consumer diversity. Diversity comes in all forms. A lot of times people think racial or cultural diversity, which any country like in India or in the US or any other part of the world is important. But there's a lot of diversity in other ways, and I'm going to talk about that, and especially in a marketing sense. So my example here is Nike. And Nike, I have to admit right now, is one of my favorite brands. It's one of the first brands I ever did any sort of work with. I was a Stanford Business School professor for a number of years out in the West Coast. And got to know the head of marketing for Nike. This is in the late 80s, so a long time ago. And I've followed him ever since. Know some of the people. I think it's a great organization. If I had to pick one organization who I think has done a great job in marketing through the years, it'd probably be Nike. Procter & Gamble or Nike, I think. A couple of my favorites. So Nike actually, if you go to their website, they actually have their mission, their brand mission is right on their website. And it says, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And there's a little asterisk, and down below it says, in the asterisk it says, if you have a body, you're an athlete, okay? Congratulations, everybody. We have good news for you, in case you weren't sure, okay? You're an athlete. Now, I joke, the fact is, that's actually a pretty bold statement. You know why? Because it's Nike saying, we are not just marketing to the world's elite athletes. We're marketing to everybody. That is a bold statement. So I'm going to come back to that in a second. The other thing they have on their website is a set of values, which I think are very, very important values to inspire, to innovate, to focus on what matters, to really connect with their customer and to care about them and the environment and other things. They've got some great values. And they actually have a brand mantra, which I'm not going to talk about so much today. I think it's very important. I've worked with a lot of companies to craft their brand mantras. 3 words that capture the essence of the brand. It provides direction and focus. For years, Nike's mantra was authentic athletic performance. And it was so important because it drove their R&D, it drove their marketing communications. It really was critical. So back to Nike, back to this mission. So one thing that's interesting, so Nike for years has had a model they called the pyramid of influence. And their belief was that in any marketplace, and I think this is true probably for any one of you, there is a pyramid in some sense where you have your most involved, your most knowledgeable, your most profitable. There are lots of ways to define your pyramid. At the very top, small, not the largest percentage. And at the base, you have yours, in their case, the top of the pyramid was the top athletes, the elite athletes who were doing world-class athletic performance, Olympic caliber. Then they have their weekend warriors who are very active. They're just not professionals. They're not quite, they're ones who do a lot, but it's more in the weekend, or maybe during the week some. And then you have your casual athletes who have the body, okay? So technically they're athletes because they have a body, but they're not super engaged, okay? So Nike has thought long and hard about how to market to every one of those segments. And in particular for them, one of the things they've long recognized is that if they market with those top athletes, if you see Ronaldo and Wayne Rooney, if you know your European football, that affects, trickles down and affects other segments. But they also market directly to each one of those different segments. A big issue for almost every company I work with is there a pyramid of influence? So if I work with Levi's, which I have, in jeans, or with Dockers, which are their pants, is there a pyramid of influence? Does it matter if they are appealing to the most fashion-oriented segment at the top of the pyramid? Because the fact is they don't sell most of their product up there. Do they even need to worry about that? Is there a trickle down or not? So something to always think about. Nike has really thought about this very first one about getting close to the customer, knowing them. They know that. And the thing I love about the way they've defined their strategies, they talk about having a broad access point. How accessible are you? How broad is your access point? And they have always said, we have a very broad access point. In other words, we are relevant to many, many different kinds of customers. And you see that with that pyramid, and you see that with their mission statement. So getting that first thing right is critical, because everything follows from that. Staying close to the customer, knowing what they want, knowing what they don't want, and figuring out your segments. So the second kind of imperative to me, beyond sort of that customer focus, the customer relationship, the brand understanding, is then to recognize that you've got to go beyond the product performance, the service specifications, to really think about, and the rational benefits, to think about going and making sure that you have the right design, the right emotional payoff, the right intangibles. Branding's about both of those. So you start often with the rational, with the product, and you have to have that. I said that in my first slide. But you need to go beyond that. And in particular, design is probably one of the real keys, it seems, these days. How products are designed, how they look, how they feel. So the thing I love about design is there's a functional side to design and there's an aesthetic side to design. It's literally how it works, how efficient it is, how easy it is to use, and it's just how it looks, how it feels. Both matter.